In 1945, as the Second World War drew to a close, and the world began to walk unsteadily from the ruins of the past into the dawn of a new age, George Orwell wrote, "Most people who bother with the matter at all would admit that the English language is in a bad way, but it is generally assumed that we cannot, by conscious action, do anything about it." Now, in the wake of a war in which tens of millions of people have been killed, and tens of millions more have been displaced, devastated cities and countries, and raised profound new ethical questions, particularly after the Holocaust and the atom bomb, and in a climate of food rations, refugees, disease, wrecked economies, and new threats, you might have wondered why the current state of the English language was what concerned George Orwell the most. Well, it was because Orwell saw language as connected to all of those other things. For one thing, the current state of the language was not the result of slops. He wrote, "It's clear that the decline of the language must ultimately have political and economic causes." And for another thing, our language would affect our ability to deal with issues. He wrote that language becomes ugly and inaccurate because our thoughts are foolish. But the slovenliness of our language makes it easier for us to have foolish thoughts. If one gets rid of these bad habits, one can think more clearly, and to think more clearly is a necessary first step toward political regeneration. And so in his novels, his essays, and his journalism, George Orwell fought totalitarianism with a pen. He believed that for totalitarianism to rob us of our freedom, it had to lie to us and give us a schizophrenic language. And so for us to maintain our freedom, we had to resist by thinking and writing clearly. Well, one of Orwell's contemporary heirs is the Christian writer Marilyn Chandler McIntyre, whose latest book calls abrupt attention with the title "Caring for Words in a Culture of Lies." McIntyre writes that caring for our language is a moral problem. And so if you just turn on the news these days, I think you'll see that Orwell and McIntyre both are speaking the truth. Our public discourse is filled with lies, exaggerations, distortions, and fear-mongering, which steal our chances to think and talk clearly about significant issues. And in the midst of this going on in our public discourse, the lectionary offers us James chapter 1 for our reflection and worship. For James, the heart of the gospel is in how we treat one another, whether we care for, respect, and love each other. And sometimes in biting language, James takes on the sins that he sees in the early Christian community. What troubled him was that the well-off members of the community do not seem to treat their less well-off members as equals. They are particularly lacking when it comes to relationships with orphans and widows. You see, for James, charity was not enough. The real church is radically egalitarian. Everyone is equal. There's no hierarchy of privilege. And so many of these snobs have excused their behavior by claiming that their faith is sufficient. But sufficient for what? James seems to ask. Because James believes that if you're going to follow Jesus, then your living will be transformed. You will act differently. You will relate to people differently. This is evidence that you truly understand and have embraced and embodied the gospel. New Testament scholar William Countryman puts it this way: human beings can absorb the message of the gospel only as they act upon it. Or as James more eloquently says, be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only. Notice that for James, the word that we hear and do is connected to liberty, to how we treat the least of these, to our relationships with the world. Could it be that, much like Orwell, James understood that language is deeply connected to our relationships with people and issues of politics and economics? Yes, I think that's exactly what James thought. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. See, how we handle words affects our relationships with other people, and it's our relationships with other people that affect how we handle words. Well, this summer, we have all experienced some very interesting use of words. One of our state representatives issued a proclamation of morality, yet ironically and hypocritically, the proclamation did the following things. First, it misquoted various founding fathers. Some of the supposed quotes that it used are not known to exist in the extant writings of the person to which it was attributed, and others were taken wildly out of context. It also blamed the economic collapse on gays, divorcees, and others it didn't like, instead upon the factors that are well documented as causing it. Greedy financial companies, conspicuous consumers, failed regulators, bad monetary policy, cowardly politicians, etc. And the morality that it argued for was a set of tired old issues from the culture wars, and it addressed none of the real issues of economic morality like poverty, hunger, access to health care, and the exploitation of the environment. Now, I don't think that it's any coincidence that those who would abuse our language in this way are the very same people who violate the law of liberty and love that James is writing about. They hold to their privilege, excluding others from full access to the church and blessings of society. Opposed to their darkness, fear, and hatred is the grace and truth which comes from God. And James here calls our Father and our Mother the Father of lights and the Mother who gives birth to us by the word of truth. Every act of generosity and grace originates with God. Every act of hoarding privilege, of denying grace, of excluding the other is contrary to God. When we act with grace and generosity, then we are acting in the light and truth and are the first fruits of God's new world. Well, in order to be creators of this new world, we must learn some skills. James lists listening, slow to speak, slow to anger, ridding ourselves of wickedness, welcoming with meekness the implanted word, caring for orphans and widows. You see, to be doers of the word and not hearers only means we're to practice the disciplines of the Christian faith. Things like study and prayer, worship and service, but also things like stewardship and simplicity, confession and hospitality, Sabbath, friendship, forgiveness, and peacemaking. When we're learning to play baseball, there are a set of skills that have to become habits for us. We have to work at throwing and catching and hitting. For most of the people, these things do not come naturally. It's something they really have to work at over time with lots of practice. And these aren't skills that we develop alone. We learn in the context of a group of people. We cannot learn to throw a ball and catch it by ourselves. We learn from parents and coaches by throwing to and receiving back from someone else. It is a skill that I, for one, have never developed. I do throw a baseball quite stereotypically.